Okay, we are live.
Yay!
Hey! All right. Hey, everyone who is tuning in. We are back today with Mentl.Sesh episode 11, and I'm joined with Maryah Greene, aka Greene Piece. And so I'm going to read Maryah's bio, and you guys can get to know a little bit about her, and then we'll get into our conversation.
Sweet.
So Maryah Greene is a New York-based Japan-bred plant stylist and doctor. She's a graduate from Bank Street College of Education, mastering general education and literacy, as a first-generation college graduate. While all seemingly unrelated, it's Maryah's blended background and upbringing, paired with her inherent and undeniably nurturing nature, that seamlessly led to the creation of Greene Piece. So, woo! This is exciting. So Maryah and I met back last year, earlier this year.
Yeah.
At this point, it's like time is a blur. But we met through a mutual friend, I guess, named Edgy, who owns a brand called Seasons. And because she was a client, or they are one of her clients who she styles plants for in their office, and I think this is the coolest field. I don't know too much about plants. We were talking about this before we got on this live call. So I'm really excited to hear your story, and I'm also really excited to talk about how plants kind of collide with mental health, because I definitely think there's a lot of synergy and parallels and ways that incorporating greenery into your lifestyle can really help your overall mental wellness. So to get started, tell us where you're from. Tell us what led you to being here in New York City.
Yeah, the where I'm from question always gets me because I'm a military brat, so I've lived just about everywhere for 3 years. But I guess I'll say that I'm from Japan because that's the longest place I've lived. I lived there for 9 years. But I'm currently living in Bed-Stuy, moving apartments and staying in Bed-Stuy. And I've been in New York for, oh my God, has it been 3 years? 3 years officially. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. New York. Okay.
Yeah.
So how was that transition? I can imagine it probably culturally very different, and just like for me, I came from a very small town in Pennsylvania, and moving to New York was very much a shock to my system, just trying to keep up with this fast-paced lifestyle here.
Yeah, it's it was more of a culture shock leaving Japan than it was going to Japan, because I moved there when I was 6. So it was every major milestone while I was younger occurred while I was there during those 9 years. So moving back to the U.S., I moved to Philly, and then I moved to D.C. for college. I went to GW, and then I moved here for grad school, as you mentioned. So hopping around has just really felt normal. Like after 3 years, I sort of get this itch of like, okay, what's next? Like I'm over it. And I guess I'll say I'm kind of feeling that right now, but I'm definitely not leaving New York. Yeah, I'd say living in New York is definitely, it's taught me, I guess the biggest thing is it's taught me how to survive with minimal resources. And I guess like literally anyone could say that. But mainly because while in grad school was when I started Greene Piece, and it started as like a side hustle. And a friend was like, "Oh no, you should start like charging people for this. You're good at this." And so I thought, "Oh, okay," because I came here thinking like you go to school, you get the job in what you studied, and then you're successful. But this is the one thing that was A, a hobby, and B, something I absolutely loved and didn't study in this like school. So it felt very freeing to do something that I created, and I feel like that can only really happen in New York. So it was a really, really cool experience while starting.
Yeah, 100%. And from my understanding, you were teaching at one point.
Yeah, I was. So while in grad school, I was studying education and literacy. And so I was student teaching. I student taught at a couple public schools, but I first taught 3rd grade and then I taught 5th grade, which I miss it so much. It was one of the best experiences ever. I will say that, oh God, I can't even imagine what it would be like to do that right now, because my path was to literally graduate, which I did in May of this year, and then start teaching 5th grade. But obviously, I took the Greene Piece route, and I figure I can always go back to teaching. But I'm kind of glad that I did, considering everything that's like happening as a result of COVID. So it's kind of just like waiting it out to see whether the two paths come together or if I'll go back to teaching. Who knows? But right now, everything is pretty solid, which is a blessing to say.
Yeah, no, and it's super cool. So I work full time for a foster care agency. So the work with kids, you know, I do therapy, mental health therapy for kids in foster care. So the work with kids, I think is a truly, how do I describe the type of work? Like, you have to have a lot of patience, one, for it, but you have to really have a passion for it too. And teaching or any type of helping profession, I would say, you know, you don't really get into it for financial reasons, so what I've been told, at least. You get into it because you really love it and you really care about it. So let's talk more about Greene Piece. How did this path start for you? Like, did you have any specific standout experiences or anything that kind of happened that kind of changed that direction for you?
Yeah. So I got my first like big girl apartment, I call it, when I moved to New York, because it wasn't like a dorm where I was like stuffed into like a shoebox spot with like a ton of like roommates. And so moving to New York and moving into that apartment, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make this space the dream apartment that I see on Instagram or whatever. And so I went to a nursery or plant shop at one point, and I just spent like money I didn't have on like 20 plants. And then after a month or so, they all died. And I was just like, okay, either I got sold like some really crappy plants or I just don't have a green thumb.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went back to the plant shop and I was like, okay, all my plants died that you sold me. Can I either get some that like aren't going to die on me, or like tell me what I did wrong? Like, what am I missing? And after talking with the people that work there and like visiting different shops over time, I got the general consensus that wait, it's not me. It has nothing to do with my lack of experience or even knowledge about my plants. It's really about having the right plants for my space.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started practicing and like bringing different plants home and testing them out and assessing my lighting and just sort of like being a little scientist in my room. And then as school started and I started to make friends, I started helping out other friends and like family members with their spaces and recommending plants. And then along the way, I think it was like 6 or 8 months later, a friend of mine was like, you're really good at this. I think you need to monetize this and you might have a business here. And so he gave me like this fat budget to do his apartment. And he was just like, I trust you. And I just was like, wait, really? You're going to trust me to like spend your money and on plants and make sure they don't die? And I did it. And I ended up landing in the New York Post for that space. And
Wow.
that was like the catalyst for everything. So it was that one friend, Sean Valentine, that believed in me. And it just took off from there. It's been 2 years.
That's phenomenal. And, you know, that's sick because a lot of people, I think, especially when it comes to plants, you know, what you were telling me with your story about, you know, you went out, you bought a bunch, they kind of all died, and most people would probably just give up after that point. I would at least, you know, and I think, you know, like, people often think about the term like green thumb and like either you have it or you don't, you know, and it's interesting what you were saying about how it's not necessarily about whether you got it or you don't. It's about curating plants that are a good fit for your space, which is really cool because similar to what you're doing with Greene Piece is really what we're doing here with Mentl is curating mental health tips and resources for each person individually in their life and how that realistically will fit, you know, because those textbook practices might not be the best match for some people, and that's okay. So there's already one way that this kind of aligns, which is pretty cool to see. So would you say like a green thumb is a real thing, or what's your opinion on when people talk about having a green thumb?
The green thumb is BS. I don't know if I can curse on here, but I'll just say BS.
First, go.
The green thumb is a big part of the reason that a lot of people stop after they have a bad experience with one or two or three or more houseplants. And I think it's because, like I did initially, chalk it up to like, I'm not built for this. And I think a lot of my work, an overwhelming majority of it, comes from the things that I learned in grad school while studying education. And so we hear people say all the time, I'm not a math person, or like social studies isn't my thing. Like I'm just not good at it. It's not my thing. And it's not about you having some genetic ability that someone else doesn't. It's about whether or not you're taking the time to do it. That's the first part. It may take you more time than the next person to understand it, but it's about how much time you're putting in. And I would also say what makes or breaks it is the teacher that you have. So if you go to a plant shop and you pick up a plant and someone's like, oh, this one's super easy, water it once a week, you're good to go. They didn't tell you anything about lighting. They didn't tell you the name of the plant. They just said that you got it. It's an easy plant.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it could have been easy for you, but like when I brought that fern home, that thing cried in like 2 days. That was my experience. So I equate a lot of the things that I'm good at growing up with teachers that took the time to cultivate and teach me the most important components of making sure that I'm doing the job successfully or learning the best way possible. So it's the exact same thing with plants. And so I went from literally overnight writing lesson plans for my kids to then creating care guides and step-by-step guides for people who were looking to bring houseplants into their space. And so I use the same approach when giving people ideas on how they can start bringing plants into their space.
Yeah. So you don't have to obviously go into detail on your methods, but from what I'm hearing you say, it's a very individualistic approach, meeting each person where they are at, literally, like where they live, and what their apartment looks like, but also just understanding probably their lifestyle and what is going to be a good fit for them. I think is great because, like you mentioned, you do go into plant stores, and I've had that experience a million times where I go into a store, I don't know what the hell I'm looking at. I couldn't tell you any of the names of these plants. And by the way, everyone, these plants are inside because there's a storm happening, and they came in to be protected from the storm, and it just so fittingly all happened on today with Maryah. So, fate, okay? But anyway,
it's perfect.
No, it's so true. You go into these plant stores and people are just kind of like, yeah, just water it once a week, you're good. It likes a lot of light, it doesn't like a lot of light. And I've also heard, just from friends who are into plants and making their spaces green, that, certain plants don't adapt well next to other plants. I don't know how true that is, but it's kind of cool, how there's this relationship between each plant you have and making sure they kind of get along with one another if they're in close proximity. And it's a lot of information that you really have to look into and learn. And it just unless you're born with this part of your brain that is an expert on greenery and plant and whatever horticulture, I think it's something that you just have to work at.
Exactly. And again, when I first started, I had two sort of dilemmas. One being, I don't feel right charging people for something that is grown naturally from the earth and is supposed to be accessible for everyone. The feeling you get from being around houseplants, for me, I had a really hard time justifying charging people for me to curate your space. And then I had a talk with that friend who told me to make this a business, and my boyfriend, and it was really, well, you're not charging them for bringing plants into their space. That's part of it, but you're charging them on the time and the expertise that you've developed over this 2-year period. Because if I'm not consulting or doing an interview or something like that, I'm literally in here studying and just reading up on different types of plants and being a mini botanist. But all of that to say that there's so much information on Google and people and so much information when you go into that plant shop and you just don't even know where to start. So that's how I, over time, began to tell myself, okay, what you're doing is actually a service that the cost can be justified. And then the other part of that was really trying to make people feel like they're doing everything right with the knowledge that they have. And so I don't shame anyone. It's so funny when I walk into a house or a bar or whatever, people just start apologizing for their plants. I'm like, you do not, I don't judge. And I honestly don't even look at the plants when I walk in because that's work. If you're an accountant, you're not sitting here just doing math problems when you're off. So I've learned to separate the two. So that's sort of just been my journey along the way.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's funny because I'm the same exact way as a therapist. With my friends, I'm always like, I'm not your therapist. Don't come to me for therapy. Like, that's my boundary. When I'm off the clock, my mind is off of that therapy mode. I don't want to have to put my brain in that mode. It's a lot of mental energy. But, going back to your point of just like, being able to justify that it's all the time and the work that you put into something as a business owner. For anyone really starting their own business, do you have any advice that you can give? Because I know it's hard to know your worth at times and to set those prices and to feel confident. And especially as a woman, I would say too, in New York City, to try and, justify and stand up for what you deserve. So do you have any tips or any advice that, you've learned from yourself, from other people, from whoever on that?
Yeah. No, this definitely takes time. I guess it's multiple things. And I wish that I had known this when I was starting out. The first was my first 10 clients, I was breaking even or coming out of my pocket. So I used to charge something like $15 an hour to go all the way out to Long Island, purchase plants, and then bring them back to you. I don't know what the hell I was thinking. I thought that would be like an hour operation. I don't know what I thought, but I was in the hole. I spent so much money because I didn't want to give people an invoice at the end like, oh, your bill's actually 500. I quoted you for 100. So be patient with yourself. That takes time. The second part, and I just had this conversation with a friend before we hopped on, and it was, I asked her if she could, I asked for one of her services, and she said, yeah, absolutely, because you're my homie, it's going to be $100. And I was just like, and I hope you're here, you know who you are. I was like, no, try again. What is your normal rate? And I say that, oh no, sorry.
No, it's all good.
I say all of that to say that sticking to your rate is the most important thing. Because you're cheating yourself every time you give someone a discount. And if they're your friend, that discount, they shouldn't even want to pay it.
100%. And yeah, no, it's true. And I think, a lot of trial and error, like you said, the trial and error part, because you realize, you might quote someone something and then things happen you don't even account for. And that's part of growth, and that's part of just learning and the learning process that comes with doing all of this, but it's worth it in the end.
It is, totally. And to this day, I still struggle with sticking to my price all the time. Family members asking, hey, I have this plant, can you help? And I won't charge them, or super close friends, I do the same thing, but then I have to take a moment. No, you're cheating yourself because now you can't do that big project that you wanted to do.
Yeah. And then it's like you do it for one person and you feel like, you have to do it for the next and the next. And it's a constant domino effect where it's just easier to be set and done.
Absolutely. And I'll also say that that's just on a personal level. When it comes to these big companies and magazines and these corporations that want to promote me or ask for just any sort of service, I have a hard time knowing my worth consistently for what it is they're asking for. And these companies might have a budget in mind, but if their budget is underneath what you normally ask for, you just simply can't do that project. Your services are not meant for everyone. And the biggest part for me was, oh no, then they're going to go to someone else.
Yeah.
And I'm going to miss that opportunity. But that opportunity was not meant to me because my rent is out of control like everyone else who lives in New York. So I should not be shortchanging myself. And then the second part of that is then they're just not going to get the same quality of service. And I hope that they find that somewhere else. But it's it's that line between being cocky and confident. You have to walk that line and make sure that you're balancing it.
Yeah. 100%,
yeah.
100%. Because it's not just, where, for example, Instagram stuff or whatever, oh, you're getting my likeness, but you're also getting, the education and the time I've spent practicing this craft and becoming an expert in it. And that's something that comes from within, and that is part of just the process. But
absolutely,
going off of all of this, I'm sure plays a role in your mental health. And just, how you balance everything. You have a personal life outside of this, and I'm sure at times running a business, especially where it's very individualized, can be hard to set boundaries and make time for yourself. So how would you even just define mental health? And then what are the ways that you take care of your own mental health?
Yeah, defining mental health is tough when you're trying to define it for yourself. Like I was defining it for my like 30 kids, 30 fifth graders. Oh, I could do it like that. Mental health for me is, I think it's prioritizing my state of being, obviously mentally, anything that's not physical, and obviously emotionally. But I think the key to that is prioritizing. And I think as humans and in a society that values productivity, we're so used to prioritizing things that we can feel and see. And so it's really, really tough. And I think that lately we've equated it to self-care. Go buy that face mask, or go buy that purse that you deserve because you worked really hard, or go treat yourself on that $200 dinner, whatever that may look or sound like. But the key for me is not, and I used to do this all the time, but it's like working super hard and then burn out and then treat yourself to make up for all that like crappiness that you treated yourself as that week. It's trying to do that on just a random Tuesday. And what that might look like for me is like not watering my plants. Not that I'm like making them dry out or thirsty, but like all of my plants have been watered for the week. I'm going to take a break because for someone else, like watering your plant might be your self-care moment or like your mental health break. But for me, it's very much work. So on my day off, I literally do not touch my plants, and I don't come into this room because it's my like break and peace of mind.
Yeah.
And then I'll just like go and watch, what am I watching right now? The Wire, Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah.
And I'll just take a moment. Like that's just what it is. So I think it's tough because a lot of the questions I get asked are like, tell us about self-care and mental health. And we obviously equate that to like spending time with your plants, but imagine that being your full-time job. It's literally the opposite for me. And I wish that I got to express that more often, but it feels like lately I've been put into this box of like, you're living the self-care, mental health dream when it comes to jobs. But I think that there's a little bit more thinking involved because it's obviously my 9 to 5, you know?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. The same goes, for people who are in the fitness industry, in, whatever industry, even the beauty industry at times, it really is true, it's, you cannot, too much of something is not helpful. So we have to take those breaks for ourselves. And yes, for other people, like you mentioned, having a green space could definitely boost your mental health. But for you, it's your job, and it's something that you have to dissociate from at times because you can't, always think about work. And sometimes work and self-care do not align. So going off of that, I guess I want to ask, my next question would be, how do you see, for other people who enjoy having a green space, how do you see mental health effects as far as the clients you work with? Do you notice, like, people making comments like, oh my gosh, like having a space filled with plants really helps boost my mood? Or, what kinds of correlations do you see between that?
Yeah, a lot of the spaces I've been doing, especially during quarantine or during the pandemic, has been like, I'm working from home. Let me take more time to curate a space that makes me feel good, or prioritizes my mental health, etc. And so I guess even before that, the purpose, my clients normally fall into one or two categories. It's, I want to create a space that makes me feel good, or I want to create a space that looks good. And sometimes it's both. And so I love the clients, obviously, where it's both, or it's, I want my space to make me feel good. And I guess I would say that it's a collection over time, but it seems like it's evolving. When I first started out, it was mainly people who wanted their space to feel good, but like everything else, I won't necessarily call it a trend, but it's definitely something that's like, we've all seen it, like take off on Instagram, where it's like, here's my plant, once they're a Monday, and it's sort of just become this like huge wave of like, get on the train of plants. And so when I go into clients' homes, whether it's a long-term client or I'm just doing a consultation and this is the first and last time I'm meeting you, it's letting them know, to whatever capacity you would like something green in your life, whether it's one leaf or a massive plant behind you, whatever you want. It is your journey, and don't let anyone else tell you how to take care of your plant if it's working for you. Obviously, take the advice that you need if you're getting some, or if you're in need of it. But I think that's what disrupts the mental health journey that you'll have with your plant if you're trying to do it the same way that someone else is. And similarly to like what you said, and like trying to curate the best ways for people to have access to mental health, or whatever it is that they need to have access to that. It's got to be your journey.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think, social media is really great for a lot of reasons, but I think there's also, like you mentioned too, like trends that emerge, whether plants or whether it be with mental health, where people want to talk about it and be in those conversations, but it sometimes raises red flags for people who are in those respective fields, to want to make sure that the people are not only, talking the talk, but walking the walk as well, and doing the work that goes into speaking on these topics with expertise, because it's important. And, there's a lot of people that follow on social media, and you want to make sure that the correct information is what's being put out there from a holistic standpoint, and also, not being too preachy about it at times, because I don't think, like you said, I'm very much aligned with the individualistic and meeting people where they're at approach, because I think everyone has unique experiences in life, and everyone has, everyone is unique. So we have to keep that in mind, whatever our craft is. So going back to, I want to know, like, what a typical day looks like for you, especially now, you're stuck inside with plants, and I'm sure, like you mentioned, you have to go in other rooms because you probably get triggered. It's like too much. So what's your day to day?
My day to day, so I think it was teaching for a couple of years that made me an early bird. I wake up at 7. I cannot sleep any later than 7. I'll wake up at 7 and I'll maybe go listen to NPR, do whatever, and maybe go back to sleep. But I'm an early riser, so I'll get up. And the first thing I do is come in here, the room with all my plants. And I don't have my phone or anything. I just take a moment to assess everything. No, I'll just say it how I normally say it. I take a moment to assess everyone, and we just talk. And I also just check out the new growth, because there's so many in here that I might not, like, something could be growing in here and I might not notice until like 2 weeks later, until it's fully like bloomed or opened up. So I just like take a moment and like look around at everything, and then I'll do my normal like get ready, or like prepare my coffee, throw on some clothes. Sometimes I'll work in pajamas. And then depending on how I'm feeling, like I'll come in here and work and surround myself with my job, aka plants, or I'll like go into the living room where there's like only one plant, and that day that might be what I need to focus, not being surrounded by plants. So that was today, for example. I sat on the couch and did a lot of administrative stuff. So it's like doing virtual consultations or sending care guides to people, etc. And when I'm not doing that, like on Thursday, for example, I have a pretty big installation, and that's when I'm doing what I set out to do 2 years ago, and that's just being with the plants and repotting them and putting them in a space and seeing someone ooh and ah about their new space. Like that's what I live for. Not to complain about the administrative stuff, because I love my job, but that's what brings me the most joy and makes it all worth it. And so I mentioned to you before we hopped on that I had a installation that was supposed to be yesterday. It was postponed, and so for now I have this person's massive plants in here. So I'll just give you all a tour of how chaotic my space is at the moment.
It's very green. I love it. But I can understand how it's probably like, okay, I cannot be around work 24/7.
Totally. And then when I'm done with the day, it's like catching up with my friends, whether it's like FaceTime or like going out to like do a socially distant drink, or like spending time with my boyfriend and like cooking together. We enjoy cooking. He's an amazing chef. Yeah, just taking some time to unwind, and the key is not being social.
Yeah. And it's kind of nice to have that just Zen time, I guess you can call it, It's super interesting, though, how you mentioned, like, in the morning you come in, you kind of take notice of just the growth that's happening around you. And in a way, that is mindfulness, really. You're present, you're in the moment, you're looking to see, like, what's happening around you, and you're honing in on the here and now. But at the same time, it can also be not so helpful for you, depending on, what you need that day. So going back into the whole mental health thing, it goes to show that some days we might need a certain thing, and other days that certain thing might not be helpful for us. And that's perfectly fine. We have a toolkit of coping skills for a reason. That's why we kind of try to create this list of things, because some days things work and some days they're not the best.
And today, just being in here was just not working for me, because I could not be excited about the new leaf coming in behind me. And as we talk right now, I'm seeing it and it's just throwing me off. But like in the morning, that's what I needed, that mindfulness moment to take notice. But then I'm like, okay, that's enough. And now it's time to start working.
Yeah, no, 100%. Do you recommend any okay, this is maybe a weird question, I don't know. Do you recommend any specific plants for, like, specific symptoms of mental health? So, like, people who are struggling with, like, depression and, like, maybe struggling to get out of bed, or lack of motivation, or for anxiety, people who worry frequently. I don't know, just a random question I had that maybe there's something that comes to mind.
Yeah, no, that's not random at all. And I guess, full transparency, before I started my business, when I moved to New York, it was the most lonely time of my life. And there were days where I did not get out of bed. I didn't know anyone in New York. And I was paying like $1,100 a month to live in this like shoebox. And like, that's so New York, to just be here, to just exist and like not know anyone. And it was a really sad and lonely time. And the only thing sometimes that would make me get out of bed was like the wilting plant. Like, oh, it needs some water. Let me see what's going on here. And I think that's when I developed my attachment or my love for plants. And so I always recommend the plants that are quick growing or fast growing, just because it allows you to take notice. So one of those is the pothos, and I have one right here. I keep it next to my desk for a reason. And this is just a cutting of a pothos. But I keep it next to my desk because it grows very quickly, and I have a new leaf maybe every like 2 weeks. Wow. And so it just allows me to take notice that this right here is like 10 or 12 leaves. It's my like grounding, I don't even want to call it a grounding plant, but it's just like the stem that I have here to help me keep track of time, because quarantine has just been like such a mush of time. So I highly recommend pothos plants, or any fast growing plant like a monstera, that you can take notice of the constant growth. It's really helpful for me.
That's really cool. Yeah, and it's it's a really cool, like, concrete representation of just growth in itself. Literally growing, and it's literally showing how, like, as time goes on, we can improve and we can get better and we can keep on keeping on, per se.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And each of those leaves represents like a marker. Like the new leaf coming in, I'm going to remember that. Oh, I remember showing that on the Mentl.Sesh. Like that was my Mentl.Sesh leaf. Like they're all sort of like points in time for me. It's very helpful.
Yeah. And sometimes that stuff makes a huge difference for us.
Yeah.
To be able, even like for me, like I'm studying for my next licensing exam month. And so a lot of little like nods, like stuff like that actually help me remember things, so even improving your memory, your concentration, things like that, it's really important and can help your just focusing. So very cool. Let's see here what other questions I have. Okay. So you've shown and you've proven that you can be creative in ways that you nurture and help others. Do you have any tips for people who are looking to potentially find their niche, like you did, to let that nurturing side out? And it doesn't necessarily have to be in the same field. It can be a completely other one. But how did you really hone in on letting that side of you flourish?
You mean grow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Grow. I'm trying to think. I don't want to glamorize the idea of that time period that I experienced like sadness and grew attached to plants. That was my experience in becoming or developing my love for what I do. And so I obviously don't want to say like you have to be in that dark space to realize it, but I will say that sometimes the things that pick us up on those days should remain sacred. I absolutely love what I do. But I've had to create rules and boundaries for myself to keep it sacred. So whatever it is that you're looking to develop, let's just say you're an amazing photographer and you want to open a studio or you want to showcase some of your work. If it means that much to you, protect it and set some boundaries beforehand. And so for me, there was a time period where I could not come into this room because I was so burnt out and I could not even look at a plant without feeling anxious or just feeling like overwhelmed. And I realized it's because every time it was watering day, I was with my phone, like watering, like it wasn't for me anymore. And it wasn't for us between me and my plant. And so anything in here that needs water or care, you will never catch it online. You might see pictures of them, but when it's my time with them, that's my protected space and my protected time. And so whatever it is that you're looking to go into or to monetize potentially, I would say set the boundaries once you know what that is. Finding that may be difficult, but if I can give any advice on that, it would definitely be you'll find it when you're not looking for it, which is such a frustrating idea. But I think the businesses where people seek out to, oh, I'm going to start blah, 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 it will likely work, like if that's what you want to do. But I think that the most passionate and meaningful businesses are the ones where you're supplying a service and you're meeting the needs of someone who may not know how to articulate what it is that they need. It's you telling them, hey, this is what you've been looking for this whole time.
100%. And also, like what you're saying, just the idea of like, when you do something, do it for you. Mm-hmm. Don't do it for superficial validation. Because once you start getting into that mode, and I think we've all been there. I've definitely been there with social media, like, and you have to take a step back and you have to reevaluate, and it's okay, like, to go down that road, because I think sometimes we have to go down that road to really be able to take that step back, and convene with ourselves and figure out, why what is our why, if it's important.
And I would also add that why can be a free-flowing thing. Like, I would get so disappointed in myself or, like, confused. Like, what is my why? Like, that's not the same as it was last week.
Yeah.
It can evolve. It's still rooted in the same thing, but it's growing. But, yeah, I think, like, giving yourself that space to know that you're constantly evolving, and your why might change, but it'll still be rooted at its core at the same thing.
Yeah. No, 100%. It's so interesting. There's so much talk of, like, growth online. I feel like #growth is, like, a trendy thing as well. But, like, at the same time, we, I think as a society, sometimes have a really hard time with either accepting growth or realizing, like what you said, that our why might be different from week to week, But also at the same time that is part of growth, where our why is always probably going to get a little bit more specific or a little bit more curated as we go on, and that's because of our lived experiences. We eventually with time figure out more about who we are as people and more about our directions in life and how those all of our experiences in life shape the way we see the world around us and the way we see ourselves. So it's always evolving, and it's okay. And just because it might look different online, or in magazines or in whatever outlet we go to, there's always another side to things IRL. So yeah, it's cool. All right, so one or two more questions around mental health. What are your thoughts on therapy? Do you have any thoughts about it, against it, for it, indifferent?
I love therapy. I'm a little biased because, no, I'll give you the full story. So my mom is a therapist at an inpatient drug and alcohol rehabilitation center. So growing up, I was like, I'm good on therapy. there's nothing wrong with me, like that whole idea. And I felt like anytime I needed advice on something, my mom was trying to psychoanalyze me. Like I could ask her, like, should I wear the red top or the blue top? And she's gonna be like, well, what makes you feel the most like warm inside? And I'm just like, woman. So that's how I grew up with my mom. Love her to death. But I started going to therapy this February actually, and it was when I hit that wall of like, I can't do this planting anymore. I cannot walk down the street or see a friend or anything without them being like, okay, I have this plant. And I just felt like, why do I exist like on this earth other than being a walking bundle of plants? I just really felt inadequate. And started to resent everything. And so I started going to therapy, and it's been, I don't know how long ago February was, but here we are. And it's definitely been a journey, but it's allowed me to have that moment that's dedicated for me. And the biggest thing initially was like, it costs how much? But then I was like, no, I actually spend more on drinks and calling that self-care and like getting that Fenty gloss I wanted than actually going to therapy and feeling good for longer than that 10 minutes that I would purchasing something. So I'm all in favor of it, but I would definitely say that it's going to come at its own time. And I wouldn't just do it because it's a trend online or because this app now allows you to match with the closest therapist that works for you. Whatever your pace is, do that, but don't let anyone force you to go to therapy if that's not where you are, because you're going to go into it resenting it. You won't be open.
Yeah. And that's the last thing we as therapists want, is for someone to have a bad experience because they weren't there yet, and then to never want to come back to therapy because of that poor experience. And that just adds to the stigma. Do you mind if I ask how you found your therapist? That's a question I always ask people who go, because I think it's people who tune in find it really helpful.
Yeah, it was through Psychology Today. I will say that I went on Psychology Today maybe 5 times in the past 2 years and never found anyone, but in February I did. So not to say it's not helpful, but it's definitely luck of the draw, and it's 2 weeks of sorting through people and doing consultations and whatever. And then I finally found someone. I think what attracted me to my therapist when we did our like couple-minute consult or however long it was, she asked me what I did, and I told her, and she didn't give me the, oh yeah, I have a couple plans. Oh, that sounds like a fun job. Or like, that turns me off immediately. When someone says that, I don't know what it is, but I think she saw me as a human and not as a service. And I was like, I'm sold.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And also the fact, like, you're bringing up is that just like, I don't know if it's like a New York City thing, because I've experienced it way more in New York than I have in my hometown in Pennsylvania, but, or maybe it's just like as you grow older and you form a career, but we're often defined by what we do, like what our careers are.
Yes.
And, you know, something a thing I've been talking about a lot too is like with NBA players. I love basketball, so like, you know, these players, like, people on social media are yelling at them during the playoffs, and like, it's like these people have lives. Some of them have wives and children and clothing brands and other interests outside of like being a professional athlete, you know? So it's the same concept of just like how we also have a lot of other things in life that we enjoy, you know? And that's an overarching like theme of like, we're not just what our job is. We have so much more.
Totally. And I have to tell myself that all the time. That's a constant reminder, I think every day, if not multiple times a day, that I am not my job. And I think for me, it's literally saying I'm not God, because I'll start to freak out if I put a plant in someone's face and it dies a couple weeks later. I'm like, oh crap, like, do I need to refund them? Do I get them a new plant? Do I go fix? Well, like, there's only so much I can do through like a customer service like point of view, but like, I'm literally not the OG botanist here or God. So like, it's setting limitations on like what I can expect myself to do. And I think that we all need that reminder.
Yeah. Just be realistic with ourselves, and it's okay.
Yeah.
All right. Last question related to mental health. Do you have any resources or any go-to like services that you recommend, or you know, you use, like apps or nonprofits or anything like that?
Yeah, I started to use Headspace back in February. Shameless plug, I'm on it every Sunday. And this is not a hashtag ad, but obviously when they reached out to me, they were like, have you heard of Headspace? And I was like straight up like, no, I haven't. And I started using it with like the trial. And at first I didn't, it was tough for me. It was like sit there, put your headphones in and like start meditating. And like I have a hard time doing nothing. I would rather initially, like I would rather wipe down my leaves and think and be mindful. I needed something to do, and so it was something to get used to. But now I really, really enjoy it. But I enjoy it at night, and I think that a lot of meditation practices. It seems like a lot of people showcase them in the mornings or starting their day, which I get. But I tried doing it at night one time a couple months ago, and I was like, whoa, this works for me. I'm too stimulated in the morning. I'm ready to go. At night, it's a nice way to end my day. So Headspace has tools for middle of day, 2 seconds to an hour, or morning, whatever you need. I think it's a really good resource.
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm the exact same way at night. I can't do the morning either. I feel like it's too much and I get a little too sleepy. Night before bed, and sometimes I fall asleep before the meditation's even over, but it calms me down, so it works.
Right. If you can fall asleep during it, that's how you know you're calm. But I'm just thinking, I've never thought about this. I never see any videos or anything of anyone like meditating at night. It's always like the sun coming up and like. So I just thought, oh, this isn't for me. I can't meditate. Like, no, it doesn't work for me right now in the morning. So, yeah.
For sure. I use Calm because they have this the bedtime stories, and there's one with Matthew McConaughey, and he reads you a bedtime story. And
Are you serious?
Yes, and there's another one, a new one now with Harry Styles as well. I'm an ex One Direction fangirl. Not.
I probably can't listen to the Matthew McConaughey one because that's just going to turn me on. That's not going to put me to bed at all.
And I'll be honest, like I don't know what the whole story even is because I'm out before it's like 5 minutes in and I'm falling asleep. Colin, my boyfriend, will listen to it with me, and we're both like snoring before 10 minutes in. But yeah, it's really cool. All right, are you ready for the rapid fire round?
I've been so excited. When you said we were doing this, I was like, let's do it. I could do this all day. Let's go.
I have 4 questions.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit more than rapid fire. So,
okay.
Here we go. What's a book or one book that you've read that's positively influenced you?
It's a children's book. It's called Jabari Jumps. I studied literacy and general education, so children's books have my heart. And it's about a little boy that takes a literal leap off the diving board, and it just talks about how he. Oh, this is rapid fire. I'm talking too much.
No, you can tell. That's fine. You can tell.
Okay. Yeah. Just how he overcomes his fear, his hesitation, and it masks the way that he feels about his hesitation. So like, oh, I forgot to stretch. I can't do it today. Just the ways we as humans like procrastinate, but in kid language. So it's a beautiful read.
Oh, that's cool. I might look into that for my clients for therapy because I read some books to them.
I highly, highly recommend it. I actually brought it to my therapist and she bought it. So please check it out.
Very cool. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Who would play you in a movie about your life?
Oh God, who would play me? I feel like everyone just knows the answer to that question. I immediately go to, what's her name? I'm seeing her face. Scandal. Olivia Pope.
Oh God, yeah, I know her name. She's like, yes. Oh my gosh, why can't I'm terrible with like actors and actresses. Hold on.
I know. What is her name? I know that. No, I keep wanting to say Olivia.
Olivia Pope.
Olivia Pope. No.
Kerry Washington.
But she went to GW. We went to the same college, and she lived in my dorm. And I also just think she's amazing. So yeah, it's got to be her.
Cool. Like that. Yeah. Kerry Washington, right?
Kerry Washington.
Yeah. There she is. Okay. What are your top 3 to 5, 3 to 5 music artists on rotation right now on your playlists?
JoJo. I discovered that JoJo's back.
Yeah, I did not know that, but that's cool.
Yeah. Who else am I listening to? Always Gonna. Always. Specifically Meek Mill, but even more specifically, I'm listening to Dreams and Nightmares at least 3 times a week to hype myself up. What else is on my rotation? Bad, Bad, Not Good. My boyfriend's listened to them for a while, but I'm just now discovering them after he told me about it. And just different episodes of Selection Radio. I just pick random ones all the time because I can't commit to the same songs.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, last one. What's something on your bucket list?
To see a blue whale.
Ooh, that's very cool.
That's my number one thing, to see a blue whale. And if I can like have a little like, what's it called, bullet under that? What are they called? The Free Willies, black and white killer whales?
Yeah.
Yeah, them too. I don't know why I did this. It felt right.
Free Willy!
Free Willy!
All right, Maryah. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Do you want to let the people know where they can find you, if they want to get in contact with you?
Absolutely. You can find me all over New York City on a train with plants. But if you really want to reach me, you can find me on Instagram at Greene with me at the end, .piece, Piece, or on my website, yourgreenepiece.com. Where else can you find me? You can find me all over, but those are the 2 main places that you can find me. And you can always shoot me an email. And every other Sunday, I'm on Headspace. So if you want to check out Headspace, you can. And I'm also there for the free version too on Sundays.
Very cool. I'll have to check out Headspace on Sundays.
Yeah.
Cool. And yeah, for anyone watching, Maryah's IG handle is right below her image. It's also in the bio of this video. Make sure you guys subscribe because I need to get to a certain amount of followers to customize the channel name. That would be really cool. And yeah, tune in next month. We will have another guest on, and we're signing off.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Sending lots of love and growth to you and your plants.